Welcome to the Daily Objective. Yesterday, we mentioned that one of the three things that ARC UK is going to focus from now on is the work we're going to do with Don, more deeper intellectual stuff and deeper intellectual cooperation with the Ayn Rand Institute, but also a bit more in terms of, to use the term that is used out there, giving back, quote, to the community. So we very much appreciate the role that you, the audience, and our members is playing. So from now, every now and then, we're going to do something which is a bit more fun. So today we're going to do an Ask Me Anything session. We're going to do this with other presenters of the Daily Objective, and hopefully it's going to be interesting. I've got Dylan with me today. Hi, Dylan. Dylan is going to pass me the questions only for today. And as a sign again of appreciation for you, today we are also going to take non-super chat questions. Again, as a big thank you to the audience and as a big thank you for making this community better and making this community what it is and what it will become. So priorities to the members' questions, then we go to super chats, but then also we are going to go to non-super chat YouTube live questions. So Dylan, let's start. I've seen some of them, but I haven't seen most of them. So hopefully there's also some element of surprise.
Okay, so we're going to start with a hard one. Do you plan to shave your beard?
Obviously, no. I like the beard. I'm not going to shave it. So that's a no. Plus, it's not. I prefer my bearded version. It makes nice. It's more, gives the shape, the shape of the face a bit more of an angle thing. So the beard stays. Next question. Maybe when we get to 3,000 members, I'm gonna show you some photos from the army where I've shaved heads and clean shaved, and you'll see why the beard is there.
How hard is it to work for ARI and ARC UK simultaneously? Are there tensions here?
Okay, so it's different. So working for ARI, first of all, the way I've been working with ARI up to this point has given me, it's a role which is not typical how it is to work for ARI. So I would put it this way. Working in ARI, you are first and foremost learning and developing, and also the standards are, I would say, the standards that you'd meet if you go and play in Manchester City. So if you go and play in Manchester City, there's the Guardiola way of football. You know, I'm going to work under Guardiola. I'm going to learn. I'm going to become better. But at the same time, I have to be part of a particular program, and I have to be part of something to play in a very specific and particular way. And if this works, we're going to win titles, and I'm not going to become a better player. This is how I see ARI. So it's very different from definitely the university job, and also different in some ways from ARC UK, because here we're mostly doing activism. Here we're mostly doing, to put it in top of the funnel work. Whereas ARI has a different mission. ARI's mission is, let's make sure that we keep the legacy of Ayn Rand intact and proper, and make sure that we train and create the best intellectuals who can use objectivism to explain the world. So it's different. It's two different things. Each one has its perks. Each one has its difficulties. So I'm very happy for both, because they are two different things. What was the last part of the question? If there is any
tension between the two.
Tension. Yeah, in a way there is some tension. So, for example, again, it's different mission. So I wouldn't say some of the topics we cover here, it would be difficult to cover in, for example, in the New Ideal. But again, because it's a different organization with a different mission. But it's good tension. It's not tension which is bad. So the more we do with both, the merrier, the better. Good question.
Okay, here's another one. When can we expect the audio version of your latest book to come out, and in which accent can we expect it in?
Okay, if you want the audio version of the book, first you need to do two things. First, write a good critique, a good review in Amazon. Because if I only have like 3 reviews in Amazon, it's going to be a bit difficult to persuade my publisher to invest in the audiobook. I had an informal discussion about that, and I said, wouldn't it be fun to do the audiobook with my accent? I don't think they share too much of the enthusiasm, but they said it's a possibility and they will look into it. But write to the editor, to the publisher, say we want, and in which accent. I only got one. So whether I speak Greek or whether I speak English, the accent is the same. So I only have one accent. So there's only one way that I can do the book. But again, if you want to help with the book, first, of course, buy it, and a big thank you to those who have bought it. But if you bought it and you find some value out of it, write a 2 lines review in Amazon. And this is going to be a major step towards an audible version.
Nikos, when do you sleep? You're in the OAC as an instructor and still a student. You teach at college. You work for ARC UK. You always know what's going on in current events, and more that I can't remember right now. How do you fit it all in?
So thank you for the question. I'm not a student of OAC anymore because I finished it last year. So the instructor of OAC and the student of OAC, there was a gap between them. Surprisingly, to what the person who asked the question might think, I sleep a lot. So I sleep 7 hours, sometimes even more. And the only reason I don't sleep even more is because I cannot sleep very well. So I've got used to this program. It cannot go on forever, but it works. And I like these things. So for example, I don't like too much socializing, going out and stuff. I never found too much enjoyment in it. So it's not that, I'm sacrificing something, and it's not that I'm giving up something which is, of big value. Maybe if I had more time, I'd watch a bit more basketball because I enjoy it. But yeah, it's easy to fit them together. It's possible to fit them together because the one relates to the other. Let me give an example. So let's say I attend a workshop in ARI about communication or about how to give a presentation. This gives me ideas about the teaching, and quite often it gives me also ideas about how to teach, let's say, presentations to my students. So in some ways, it's not that, the one job is engineering and the other is, they fit into each other. So again, it cannot go forever and it will not go forever, but for a short, relatively brief period of time, these 3 things can go together. But thanks for the question, because the premise is that I do a lot of things, so I appreciate it.
And this is also from Mary-Aline, as was the last question. She asked, what is your next book about?
Yeah. I was thinking I would do something about the manosphere, but that's not the plan anymore. So the plan is, actually there is no plan, but I'm thinking to do something on communism. So there's this idea that, and I hear it all the time. I even saw a short clip on Twitter today by Gad Saad, who said something like, communism is a good idea, but not in tune with human nature. First of all, how can something be a good idea and not be compatible with human nature is one thing. But it's this thing that communism is good in theory, but it didn't work in practice. And this is something that I would want to put on the test. So, I've spent a lot of my time in communism, in the movement, but also studying communism. So maybe why not put it into action? And of course, this could also be something which the training ground for it could be ARC UK. So we've discussed there might be something where we do with the members, let's say, a closed circle things, the history of communism. It's going to be way more interesting than just, a history lesson. So something like that is probably going to be the next project, but this also relates to other things that are going to become a bit clearer in the not so distant future.
On a relevant note, we have 2 questions about communism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's one. What are some common misconceptions about communism you see in the liberty movement more broadly?
Misconceptions about communism. Yeah, there are 2 misconceptions. The first is that the people in the liberty movement see AOC and say she's a communist. So that's the first misconception on who is a communist. So to cut the long story short, today there are no communists. There is no communist movement, and communism as a political movement, in my view, is dead. Now, you could say, yeah, but the ethics behind communism is in other movements. Yeah, but that's another discussion. Communism as a political movement is and has been and is dead. And the more you see the rise of movements like, I don't know, environmentalism or identity politics, these are all coffins in, what's the term, in the, they signify that communism as a movement has been defeated and is over. Of course, there's a good chance these are also bad, but these are not communists. So that's the one misconception. The other misconception is people have a simplistic take on why communism was bad. So, you know, the typical thing, well, you would say something against the party and KGB would arrest you. Communism was significantly worse in significantly different ways. So I would even say the evil of communism is more difficult to comprehend in some ways than even the darkest moments of the 20th century, like the Holocaust or the Rwanda Holocaust. Careful, the Rwanda genocide. Careful, I'm not saying it's worse in terms of magnitude of evil. This is another discussion, but it's more difficult to comprehend. So, for example, when you read the history of the Moscow trials, they don't make sense. You can spend 3 years locked in a library reading about the period of terror and the Moscow trials in the late 30s and still not understand it. Whereas with other brutalities like the Holocaust, exist in your mind can make sense. You have some very, very bad people. They hate a group for whatever reasons, and they want to destroy this group. Horrendous evil, but at least you can make sense of it. With what happened in communism, where you'd have everyone against everyone else, and the executioner of today literally being the person that would be executed tomorrow, it's things that the mind cannot process them. So you can read scenes about, for example, they would go and arrest someone, and because the local KGB had quotas on people to liquidate, there would be 5 other people in that room, all communists or very good communists, and they would be arrested as well. Or at some point in 37, I think, you have official decrees that says that the NKVD can basically execute people almost without trial. And this, as at the same time, intellectuals in the world say, yeah, this is brilliant. Or you have intellectuals going to the gulags. So that's another thing many people don't get. These crimes were open and visible. So you have, for example, Maxim Gorky, the great intellectual, going to the gulags and saying, yeah, what I saw is it's beautiful, it's the new man is created and all that stuff. Again, this is very difficult to comprehend. You cannot comprehend intellectuals, let's say, seeing Auschwitz or Dachau and saying, oh, I see something here, something beautiful is happening here. And yet you have this with Soviet Union of the 30s. So these are some things that it's people don't get, but also it's difficult for anyone to get because it's evil of a character which is very, very difficult to understand. Great question, by the way.
Still on communism, we have one more. Could you share a bit about the impact of communism then and objectivism now on your self-esteem? Were there important changes in development in your sense of self as you move from one worldview to another?
Okay, so communism was not good for my self-esteem, I would say. It was good on a pseudo level. And the way I would put it, if you've read With the Living, imagine a Pavel Sierov and having 5 Andrei Taganovs beside him. Suddenly you think, oh, I'm also Andrei Taganov. I'm like, tough guy who's going to bring communism. So, but the reason it didn't have a good effect on self-esteem is because I was doing things that I was persuading myself that I should do and that I like when I actually didn't like it. So I would, we would go out to specific places, would listen to specific type of music, which I didn't necessarily like, but I was trying to persuade myself that I liked, or, alternative kind of lifestyles that I never liked, but again, I had to persuade myself that I liked. So that was the impact of communism. I remember one particular scene. I was in a strike or something like that. No, actually, no, it was a campaign in the port of Piraeus, not a strike, but we were giving leaflets, something like that. And I remember coming along an uncle who was traveling to Crete, and I felt not same, but I felt a bit weird. I wasn't so, and this told me later through introspection that I was not proud of what I was doing. Something inside me told me that I was not proud. That's why when I saw my uncle, I was like, okay, so that was, I would say, the effect of communism. And on a very superficial level only, it had some good effect in terms of I was doing things that till then I didn't thought that I had it in me. Mostly when it had to do with like risky actions and things like that. But overall, not a good effect. With objectivism, as we're going to say in the new course, the understanding objectivism that we're starting this week, objectivism can give you a sense of that you should at least try to have self-esteem. So that's a good start. But getting the self-esteem you need to do so much work that is not related to understanding the philosophy. So the example I've given many times in the past, I've read and listened to the speech that Francisco gave to Hank Rearden about romance and sex 5 times. And only in the 6th time when I was listening to it, I said, wait a minute, how does this apply to your life? And what are you going to do about it? Not in terms of, there are some rules and you need to follow, but how are you going to think about this topic in your own life? So I cannot say that objectivists had a positive self-esteem result because it's a process, but it's a way, way, way healthier ground because, as you see, I'm public with it and I'm not embarrassed about it, and I don't do things that I don't enjoy, as I used to do in the communist days. Next.
All right, here's a question from Alejandro. Do you think we're on the brink of a civilization collapse? What is your outlook for the future?
My joke is that I have some oil fields not oil, olive oil fields in Crete, so I worry a bit less about this than other people. Not particularly worried in terms of civil war and stuff, because I don't see two sides that can fight it out. So we are not in the 30s. Culturally, and in terms of what type of human beings are culturally produced, yeah, I think things are quite bad. But not in terms of, there's not going to be guns and stuff in the street, because who's going to hold them? Who going to be who are those who are so convinced about their ideas that they're going to take the guns and go to the barricades? Next question.
Okay, this is a super chat from Adam. You once mentioned that you used a healthy cookie recipe. Where can someone find it?
Okay, the healthy cookie recipe. I'm going to be very, very... It's not really cookies. The result is something between cake and flapjack. So you mash some bananas with peanut butter. You add some oats. You add some protein. You add some honey if you want. You blender, you chop some blueberries, frozen blueberries or fresh blueberries, so you also got a bit of liquidy stuff. You put it all together, you mix it, you make sure that it's not like a rock, but it's not liquid, it's something between stable and liquid. You put it in the formula, how it's called, you put it in the oven for 35 minutes, and you have a super healthy protein cake slash flapjack or whatever. Or you can even make it cookies and not like cake. Although turns out per cookie you get like 5 grams of protein, which is not bad. So you can have it as a dessert or as something with your coffee.
From Apollo Zeus, a super chat. He says, being Greek, what did you think of the 2006 film 300 with Gerard Butler?
Yeah, 2007 it came out in Greece. So as I think I've mentioned, this film changed what it meant, changed the archetype for what it meant to be a man in Greece. So before that, if you'd go to the gym, you would be the exception. After that, everyone was going to the gym. So it had an impact on everyone, left, right. So I enjoyed the film, not in terms of, pride or whatever, but it was a good film as a film. Historically, there are some inaccuracies, but the spirit of the film is true to more or less what happened, which means it was a battle which was heroic. It was a battle that indeed was for something like freedom and something like autonomy. And the people who went there were indeed convinced that they were fighting for something. And I think it's a good film. It's a very good, and I think even philosophically, it's a healthy, if that makes sense, film. Interestingly, I believed exactly the same thing when I was in the left. So Slavoj Žižek, the communist philosopher, said that the only 2 proper films that the left should have something to learn from of the last 20 years were Fight Club and the 300, because he thinks they should teach to the left some values that it had missed, like discipline and all that stuff. So I liked it as a leftist, and I also like it today. And it had a huge effect on Greece, on Greek culture.
Super chat from Bonnie. She asked, where do you get your news? Can you recommend sources?
Okay, that's going to be embarrassing, but mostly Twitter. I can recommend good sports sources for basketball, but my news, I mostly read Twitter. Sometimes there might be a good article on Spiked or on other, let's say, countercultural media in terms of people that I appreciate might have said something. On difficult topics, my go-to source is people I trust from ARI, the New Ideal. So, for example, the other day on the Facebook whistleblower. So when I don't really understand the topic, my go-to is ARI Intellectuals or Yaron. Where else do I get the news from? Mostly that. And when I did more TV, sometimes when I had to do current affairs on TV, so you show up in the morning and you have to comment on the newspaper, so you don't speak on one particular topic. Often I would quote warm up by listening to Ben Shapiro, because I think he has a very good way to find something to say about things that you wouldn't think, like, okay, I need to say something about, I don't know, Trump met with someone. What do I say? So I think he's a good pundit. Let's put it this way, not pundit, but he's a good news commentator, or at least at 2018, that's what I thought, but not anymore. I don't spend too much time anymore with, let's say, conservative pundits and stuff.
A super chat from Mary Aline. She asks, what are some things you and Razzie are likely to disagree about?
The question should be, what are some things that Razzie and I agree about? So we disagree about nutrition. We disagree about how long you should cook a steak. He basically says, I don't know, 3-4 minutes. I think minimum 15 minutes, or just before it's completely burned. We've had the important disagreements on politics, some of them bitter, but at the end, the personal love, how to put it, won. What else we disagree about? We disagree also on central things. So many of the things that ARC UK owes its success have happened this way, because in our disagreements, usually Razzie wins. But I think the more we know each other, the more we're careful how to navigate our disagreements so that they don't get too much. But yeah, mostly I would say nutrition. And also he thinks I'm a primitivist because I don't enjoy too much some of the amenities that he claims are amenities that make our life better. I think they're useless stuff, such as, I'm going to go public with it, such as having a subscription to cafes that don't make good cafe. And why not make your coffee at home? No one makes such a good coffee as you making your own coffee. So we have disagreements at the small level and at the big level, but we figure things out.
From Bonnie, she asks, what courses do you teach at York? Have you seen any decline in students' abilities similar to what Andy Bernstein mentions? I think he gave up on teaching the Fountainhead.
Yeah, in today's climate, I wouldn't teach the Fountainhead. And you know why. There's one particular scene that it would take so much energy to explain and put it in the proper context that I think would be a lost battle. Again, unless you can do it in a way that I don't think I can do it. So I would be skeptical with the Fountainhead in the university. So what I teach at the university, I mostly try to teach things that are related to skills, because it's more neutral, it's not too political, and it's let's say a safe haven for me. I do a lot of outreach, so let's say I'm the face of university in open days and all that stuff. I teach a bit of things around income inequality, so I present the roles versus Nozick discussion. And what else? Yeah, and some things around economics in terms of the student getting a different point of view. So I tell them about neoliberalism, quote neoliberalism, this kind of stuff. So nothing that I'm particularly opposed to, and I don't have to do almost anything that I don't want to do. And I'm eternally grateful to my good fortune that I've been teaching at York St. John University, because it's an academic environment that is basically because of the staff and the people who are my line managers and all that stuff. They give me intellectual freedom that is very, very unlikely to be found anywhere else. So it's an outlier in academia. Now, on whether the level has fallen, yes, but I don't think this has to do with the universities. It has to do with schools. When you see people who come to university and have basic problems in things like forming a paragraph or a very basic structure, you know that this is not on the universities, this is on the education system. So yes, and also it's what expectation levels you set for students. So when you sign up for OAC, the Objectivist Academic Center of Ayn Rand Institute, I don't know if it's still the same, but back in the day, 3 years ago, the first document you said says specifically that notice that here we do things a bit differently, and we are going to mark you in a way which is strict. And I remember in year one, the first time I got 5 out of 5 was after the Prague conference. So it must have been late February or March. So from October till March, I thought like I'm the cool guy, I know stuff. Not in a single assessment did I manage to get 5 out of 5. So this is what is missing from the university, setting the bar high so that the students rise to the occasion. We mostly try to accommodate them where they are, which I see it makes sense for some students, but overall, I don't think it's a great way to go through life.
A question from Phil. He asks, favorite holiday destination here, or do you always go home to your folks in Greece? In which case, Greek islands or mainland?
Yeah, I don't do the vacation things. So in the since 2017, I've been to vacations a weekend. I went to an island. It was mostly to see family and stuff. So mostly when I go to Greece, I just go home in Athens, and I haven't gone to vacation in ages. I look forward to it though. I look forward to it. Favorite destination? Anything in Greece, I like it. Anything I like it. Even if it's a small town that the average Greek thinks I like everything in Greece. I like Crete, of course. I have connections with Crete. I love Athens, so I don't need the fancy island destinations, although they're brilliant. I loved Berlin some years ago when I went for a conference. The streets ooze history. Like you see a street, and you're like, okay, there were like street fights with communists and fascists here. So I like this. I loved Bilbao. I was blown away with Bilbao. I loved it. And back in the day, I loved Paris, but I haven't been there for more than a decade, so I don't know. And Italy, but again, back in the day.
A question from Fab. He asks, has it ever been hard for you to deal with English or another foreign language? How do you deal with living a global life?
I'm horrendous with language. I don't want to say I couldn't help it, Mr. Reardon, but they say there's like something in your brain that makes you good or bad with language. I'm horrendous with languages. So my English is very bad for someone who's been in this country since 2006. I'm very, very bad with languages. I was being taught Spanish for 2 years. I literally can't even say my name is Nikos in Spanish. I did German for a decade. I don't even know how much. And I don't remember much. Though I have to say, as part of my OAC module, I will assign a film which is in German. And I was looking at it these days and I kind of remember them. So I'm very bad with languages. So I wouldn't be able to work in a non-English speaking language. And I think I'm missing a lot in my delivery in English. I think in Greek, I'm a bit funnier, a bit more witty.
From Bonnie, she asks, can you tell the story about how you met Razzie and your initial reaction?
You probably already know that it's not any big story. So when I first met Razzie, I have to say, we didn't vibe too much. Like my entry point to objectivism, the movement was George. And it was like, okay, George is the coolest guy in history of humanity. And then, but there's also this other guy who's a bit more quiet and he's not too, bombastic and all that stuff. So that's how we first met. So it was very anticlimactic. Then he wanted to open a charity. He first envisioned the Annual Center as a charity, but the charity needs trustees or something like that. So he called me and says, do you want to be a trustee? And obviously my answer is no. But I said, I know this other guy who's kind of into objectivism. And then he did the Razzie thing, which was to insist. So he said, so you're telling me no, or something like that. And then I was like guilty down. I said, well, no, I'm not telling you no. So yeah, he was completely the guy, and he was completely the guy you couldn't say no to. So he persuaded me to become a trustee. Then it didn't really work as a charity because some bureaucratic reason. So then he made it a company. So he didn't need me as a trustee. So the question is, when did we first, that's not the question, but that's a question I'm now asking myself. When did we first bond with Razzie? I'm not sure, maybe when we were launching the meetups. So we did many attempts to launch meetups around the country, which were not super successful. So there were times where we had the meetup when like only one person would show up, but we'd spend time through that. So I remember once he visited York, and he told me that while he was waiting for me, he was walking up and down and listening to the Fountainhead. And he sounded nice. And that's when I started that's what got me into Audible. So that's the story of how we bonded with Razzie, because the story of how we met again is very anticlimactic. I don't really remember much. All I remember is I didn't particularly like him. But again, I didn't know him too well. So that's the true story here.
James asks, how does a hardcore communist become an objectivist?
Okay, so I did a whole episode on this. The main question is by taking communism, the simple answer is by taking communism too seriously. So I was reading The Capital meticulously. I found things that I couldn't answer in Das Kapital. I found some answers in the Austrians, in Baumbawerk and in Mises. And that's how I was like, okay, I'm a communist, but I also like the Austrian theory of economics. Then I came into libertarianism. Then I discovered Rand. So it was a slow process. But the key element was A, taking communism too seriously, B, hanging out with the people in the Academy of Ideas and the Battle of Ideas who challenged my premises. And my favorite line by Claire Fox, who is one of my biggest mentors and benefactors, was, she would say this to all the young people: get over yourself. So that was the motto. And yeah, that's part of what took me away from being a boring leftist. And what took me away from being a non-boring Marxist was the contradictions within Marx himself and the answers that I found elsewhere.
A question from Scott. He asked, do you think CRT/wokeism has its roots in Marxism? I feel some objectivists say it isn't Marxism, almost to mean it doesn't need to be fought, dismissing it as nihilism, D2, etc.
Okay, so I'm working on it because, as you might have heard if you follow the news around the Unknown University, I'm teaching a course that goes from Frankfurt School to critical race theory. So the quick answer, I would say, is no. You could say they're somehow in the same political trajectory, but there are also very significant differences. So to put it very simply, ask yourselves, why were the communists, the real communists, like the Stalins and stuff, so vehemently opposed to things like identity politics? Even within the 21st century, you could find what modern culture would call homophobia in even the official literature of the hardcore Marxist left. So this pseudo-universalism in Marx, which, however, for Marxists are important, and the particularism of identity politics and of critical race theory are difficult to reconcile. So there is some affinity in terms of people who kind of like the altruist ideas and they jump from one to the other. But if you are serious about Marxism, then no, critical race theory, you would recognize it as a Frankenstein. No, Frankenstein was a creator, as a monster creation. So a proper Marxist would find it that this is actually the opposite of Marx universalism, or alleged universalism.
Here's a question from Zeus. He asked, how do you understand the Yorkshire accent?
The answer is, I don't always, but it's better than the Liverpool accent. So I've been to Anfield, and yeah, the York accent is a bit more difficult, but there are more difficult accents. Also, I used to live in the southeast at Kent, where the accents were very clear and very much easier to understand. By the way, I'm surprised with the amount of questions. I thought we'd have like 4 questions and would be embarrassing. We'd have to finish after like 8 minutes. Thank you for your participation. Have we got any other question?
Yeah, we have a few more. We have a question from Scott, who asked, why teach about the Frankfurt School if it's not Marxist?
Well, critical race theory is not Marxist, but the Frankfurt School, so people in the Frankfurt School see themselves as Marxists, and they very, very timidly move away from Marx. So, for example, when Marcuse, in One-Dimensional Man, which is going to be a core reading on one of the weeks, when he's talking about, well, maybe the proletariat is not the agent of revolution, he almost feels guilt. And you can see he feels guilt. He's as if he's saying, I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. Marx was wrong in this and this. But they start from a Marxist origin. They start from, and they think they're reforming Marx. Of course, for Marxists, for hardcore Marxists, even today, Marcuse is a persona non grata. But the Frankfurt School is definitely within the universe of Marx, and the people, particularly Marcuse, thinks that basically Marx is right about the fundamentals, and he tries to see where he can go with the rest and how he can apply the fundamentals to what he sees as the world. More on that on week 1 of the module, starting in January. That's going to be a fun module.
A super chat question from Jonathan. Are flapjacks just a syrup delivery device?
I have no idea what this means. Flapjacks can give you good taste and protein. So what else do you need? And 0 sugar. So the recipe I gave has absolute zero sugar. I mean, and you don't even have to put the honey if you want. It's gonna get the taste from the chocolate protein. This probably has some sugar, that's true, but you don't have to. It needs to have no sugar. We can do a live only for members, of course, real-time cooking of my protein cake / flapjack / cookies, so we can see how this goes.
A question from M. They ask, what's your opinion on campus communists and who in Greece is salvageable?
There are no campus communists in the UK, or I've met for some time I would hang out with communists, but they were Greek communists. So when I was still involved in the organization of the communist youth. Who are salvageable? The ones that are salvageable are those who become a communist because it's the only intellectual movement they see when they look around. So they see pragmatist, fascist. So I don't even care what they are. They're like killers, idealists. So they are salvageable. And also those who buy into the heroic mythology of the Communist Party, the partisan songs, the history of resistance, the history of, as they call it, the sacrifices and all that stuff. So people who are moved by ideals, and they mistakenly think that the ideas are in that milieu. They are definitely salvageable.
All right, and here's one last question. What is the last thing you changed your mind about?
Ooh, okay. The last thing I changed my mind about was the countercultural right, or if you want to put it this way, the Trumpian right and all that stuff. I have to say I'm deeply, I will say disappointed, because for some time I thought there's a countercultural element there. So as I said, and I disagree with many objectives on that, for me, the wake-up call was not January 6th, because I still think that January 6th was the expression of such a fringe part of even the fringe part of the right, that its significance for me was not to the level that it was its significance for other people. Because again, I saw who are the people involved, what is their influence, and I'm like, okay, this is the fringe of a fringe. Yeah, they probably express something, but it's not that much. But that the whole of this countercultural right jumped into a vaccine hesitancy, which for me reminds me the NPC meme. So they all say the same thing, this experimental vaccine thing. Or this idea, see how they reacted to the Zuckerberg thing, that he wants to put us in boxes and we're gonna eat bugs and all that stuff. So this anti-intellectualism for me was, I'm taking the L. I was mistaken on that. I thought that there's a possibility that this kind of anti-establishment energy could be channeled on a way that would make it a bit more, I don't know, open to new ideas. Or, okay, since I'm a radical and I want to go against the system, how do I attack this system in its fundamentals? This was my hope. It did not happen. So the last thing I've changed my mind in terms of significant things was my take on the potential of this, let's say, populist, countercultural energy around the American right. Taking the L.
I think we got to every question.
Okay, 45 minutes. I'm impressed. So again, a big thank you for that. And a big thank you for the fact that we've created this community, and it's not easy to do it. So we're going to do even more things for this community, and we really appreciate you. Now, if I remember well, at 7 o'clock, okay, Razzie says we need to do Clubhouse for my rebuttal. I was about to say no Clubhouse, since anything that was to be discussed was discussed here, but I cannot say no to Razzie. So I have a meeting in 15, but let's go to Clubhouse for like 12 minutes. And anyway, we can't stay for longer in Clubhouse, because at 7 o'clock, if I remember well, we have the integrating investor with Seth. Am I right? And today, together with Seth, we have Jim Brown, former CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute. They are going to discuss money, or I don't remember what the topic exactly is. So in 14 minutes, Seth and Jim Brown on the integrating investor. Then Sunday, we begin with the peak of course understanding objectivism. If you're in the north of the UK tomorrow, hopefully I'll see you in Buxton, where it's the northern version of the Battle of Ideas. Although people told me that Buxton is not really north, but when you live in the Midlands, they tell you that everything above London is kind of the north, and everything above Midlands is definitely the north, although if you see the map, it's not really the north. So, okay, this is not relevant to objectives, but I'm going to speak there on the topic of climate change. So, yeah, I think these are the major announcements. So, thank you very much for...
Before we go, also at 8, we have James and Lisa Van Dam. They are discussing the value of great, though philosophically false, art.
The value of great but philosophically false art, with Lisa and with James at 8. So many things happening. Okay. Thanks, Dylan. Was this your in-camera debut for the Daily Objective?
I believe so.
Dylan is the new master behind the scenes. I won't say Lord Emperor because there's only one Lord Emperor. So this is the guy who brings the show on every day, and he's you should see how good he is in terms of, you tell him at 7:58, let's have a thumbnail that includes Trump being angry, a crowd being angry, and then at the background flames. In 2 minutes you have the thumbnail. So this is Dylan. Okay, see you in Clubhouse for like 10 minutes. Thank you very much for today, and see you all soon. Bye bye.